boni din se ono no be na be di akire tu franka edi na echi nkrofo to ne ho mpe ka kasa enye de niema bebire gu maame so ebirum kura se se wo hwekora mpa sebe omfata ene se nsema ense ne mfata wo kan endi sifu nyina wonan so ara na wo koso yenkoto abaya maame na edi nkonimu eyi kyerɛ sɛ ɔmangana wɔpɛmia kanko enunti yɛmfa saade nye adesua sɛ yenyo kwanketo bi a yenso miansa emfa ho party a owom ana nea ogedi na yensuso wonsa na wo megina na wo mo omenyi mmea wo akyɛde soronko a wɔde yade enunti sɛ wo yade bia na wo yiwo mfim a kai hu sɛ ade no wuri nya ne pepepe ene mami why a vice president na ne amedi hu yawo na sɛ menti dede wo ho menti anije wo ho sɛ nkrofo bebo ajesu sɛ ne obia adu empempen so sɛ yenkan hu sɛ mami ono ne obi odi kan ye vice chancellor other University of Cape Coast ano o man nyina university won ye nyo obi a why vice chancellor kan da ono no di kan ene why obi a odi kan why vice president ne me pese mehu na metene se mmea ewo men ha ene merima ete se manije se ne yen a ye ganafo yen so bi ansa de na du mbemban so se yenye saden na nhye nkuram na nhye nchirima na wonso wonhwe no wonsu ya bibi mfam ese obia biyo obeyi ni ti wo party biema na se oman adwuma mu no mu abi e wone enso no mu na emwa na onyina esa ne se mmea wo yade ye wo ka de ho a eyeye mu ma yenyiyim mu ma yenye nhwehwanim mu ma yentame enu nkyere se wo foma yenkasem yemma kwankyere na mum yensu wonsa hwe yem parliament mia noso mumma yensu so miansa wonko parliament aban nyuma huru nyina mia ntenem ene wo hwe University of Ghana nije mia tete nkonwa akese so papa mia meti manije esane se university ni bue fitetete mia nya asa akwan ne ene onyame nchaade mia tete nkonwa so ho ma dai so ene ma ni da so se dabi beba omenyi mia ne bedi so obenya president, vice president, chief justice, attorney general ne sa man anka ye mempa bo no se mea medi so na be ye mfie wotwe na wonso ne awowo no wonfa moa yen me gedi se sa akasa makai obeti na so pam na se obia bi refefe wo party mu ana se wo constituency ana se wo mensing ba bia obia bi re sorry se ore bo no ho modern ewo amanyosem ana abanga adwuma mu ana ododo adwuma ye ho a mome yenso ngasen ne mmua won esa ne se mmea wo ho hia papa moma misima maka se wie na mentwa me ho na memra na meba ene adwumadin ye de nkomo be hyehye so na yan atoa so fefefefefe mba misima
Ready for something refreshing and great tasting for your kids' enjoyment?
Angel Cola.
For your graduation enjoyment?
Angel Cola.
Beach hangout?
Angel Cola.
For all your refreshing moments?
Angel Cola.
For your parties, get-togethers, events, and celebrations, enjoy a chilled bottle of Angel Cola.
Radio Grandma, today is your day. Over to you.
Thank you.
Enjoyment Cola.
Angel Cola.
The Enjoyment Cola. Enjoy all your moments and fun time with Angel Cola. This advert is FDA approved.
Omana Nyamedi ni tumi nam akanifo bi so tse osaje for Dr Nkrumah anyone a ekeka ho na de chance won se ode ne pa bebre na adua oman mu na oman ya chede bebre sa chede bi ne koko a chede bi ne sika kokko de nchemmo timba ene de ekeka ho nanso no se yehwa eka yebo wo sa a chede hu no edoso eche mfaso a ebre eyarehosem oman ebekọ nanimu a enye MPP enye NDC enye akuadonko anase enyom mu bia oman ni beye ya ejeme no se wotuwe ankrankre edien na woye ama oman yakọ nanim so oman hu hia ho woti hei oyo abanjuma yeni ebreben ena osori ko adwuma abanjuma yeni tumi da mpama ma ne bono no so epam no down da ho efise enyo no dia eya aban dia na aya na areho se yede sobo ni nyina bo aban no nemum yendwene se oman ne be ya eyeme no mumiefa nsiye miefa hoden akokuduro enko emmadachi yenchirima ebeba no omo nso ebenya bebipa esi na omo ammo yensobo yeye oman mei yemo ehomodin na yenwere ye ho nyema oman no ehia ye ne beye ye o enye ye o efrimi no edamwasi Ghana asumdwe man omana nyamedi ni tumi nam akanifo bi so tse osaje for Dr Nkrumah anyone a ekeka ho na de chance won se ode ne pa bebre na adua oman mu na oman ya chede bebre sa chede bi ne koko achede bi ni sika kokko de nchemmo timba ene de keka ho nanso no se yehwa eka yebo wo saa achede hu no edoso eche mfaso a ebre eyarehosem oman ebekọ nanimu a enye MPP enye NDC enye akuadonko anase enyom mu bia ɔman no bɛyɛ yɛ a ɛyɛ me no sɛ wotuwe ankorankore ɛdeɛn na woyɛ ama ɔman akɔ n'anim so ɔman ho hia wo wote ha yi woyɛ aban dwumayɛni ɛberɛ bɛn ɛna wosɔre kɔ adwuma ɔban dwumayɛni tumi da mpɛm a ma ne bɔ no nonso ɛpae mu na ɔda ho da hɔ ɛfiri sɛ ɛnyɛ ɔno dea ɛyɛ aban dea na ayɛ na awerɛho sɛ yɛde soboɔ no nyinaa bɔ aban no na mmom yɛndwene sɛ ɔman no bɛyɛ yɛ a ɛyɛ me no mommɛmfa nsiiɛ mmɛmfa ahoɔden akokoduro ɛnko ɛma daakye yɛnkyirima a ɛbɛba no ɔmo nso ɛbɛnya baabi pa asi na ɔmo ammɔ yɛn soboɔ yɛyɛ ɔman ma yi yɛmmɔ yɛn ho mmɔden na yɛnyere yɛn ho nneɛma ɔman no ɛhia yɛn ne bɛyɛ yie o ɛnyɛ yie o ɛfiri me no ɛda mo ase Ghana asomdwie man ɔman a nyame de ne tumi nam akannifoɔ bi so te sɛ ɔsagyefo Dr Kwame Nkrumah ɛne wɔn a ɛkeka ho na deɛ kyɛn soɔ no sɛ ɔde nipa bebree na adua ɔman mu na ɔman yɛ akyɛdeɛ bebree saa akyɛdeɛ bi ne koko akyɛdeɛ bi ne sika kɔkɔɔ dɛnkyɛmmoɔ timba ɛne deɛ keka ho nanso no sɛ yɛhwɛ a ɛka a yɛbɔ wɔ saa akyɛdeɛ hu no ɛdɔɔso ɛkyɛ mfaso a ɛbrɛ yɛn ɛyɛ awerɛhosɛm ɔman yi ɛbɛkɔ n'anim a ɛnyɛ MPP ɛnyɛ NDC ɛnyɛ akuadɔnkɔ anaasɛ ɛnyɛ ɔmo mu biara ɔman no bɛyɛ yɛ a ɛyɛ me no sɛ wotuwe yi ankorankore ɛdeɛn na woyɛ ama ɔman akɔ n'anim so ɔman ho hia wo wote ha yi woyɛ aban dwumayɛni ɛberɛ bɛn ɛna wosɔre kɔ adwuma ɔban dwumayɛni tumi da mpɛm a ma ne bɔ no nonso ɛpae mu na ɔda ho da hɔ ɛfiri sɛ ɛnyɛ ɔno dea ɛyɛ aban dea na ayɛ na awerɛho sɛ yɛde soboɔ no nyinaa bɔ aban no na mmom yɛndwene sɛ ɔman no bɛyɛ yɛ a ɛyɛ me no mommɛmfa nsiiɛ mmɛmfa ahoɔden akokoduro enko emma dachi yenchirima ebeba no omo nso ebenya bebipa esi na omo ammo yensobo yeye oman mei yemo ehomodin na yenre ye ho nyema oman no ehia ye ne beye ye o enye ye o efiri mi no edamwasi
He is accompanied by his spouse, soon to be First Lady, Her Excellency Lordina Dramani Mahama. Shall we all wave our flags to welcome him? Parliament now leads the entourage into the Chamber of Parliament here at the Black Star Square. The entourage of Parliament includes the clerks of Parliament and other senior officials of Parliament. As I mentioned earlier, we will soon enter the chamber of the chamber. Places on the square. Please, if you are not authorized to be on the square, kindly move back.
Honorable members, you may now resume your seats. Honorable members, I now have the singular honor of the Republic of Ghana to administer the oaths to the President-elect and the Vice President-elect. We will start with the Vice President-elect, who will take and subscribe to the oath of allegiance and the oath of the Vice President. Your Ladyship, the Chief Justice, you may now do so now.
Your Excellency, first the oath of allegiance. Kindly say after me. I,
Professor Nana Jane Oboko Ajiman,
do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
Do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance.
To the Republic of Ghana.
To the Republic of Ghana.
As by law established.
As by law established.
That I will uphold.
That I will uphold.
The sovereignty and integrity of Ghana.
Yo wetiefo yahwefo yeretua yen dwumadi so enne dwumadi a yeredi ye wo mpanimfo a ne wo baba boa yen yo yen asem a yehwe anopai eye Mohammed's education and constitutional reforms. What are the expectations? Yenwura omampani jo mahama wa hye bobi se orehwe se nsakrai beba nwumasuam ewo omanyim ha ana orebɔ no homoden sɛ obasakra adesua mu efi mfitiase school kosi adentem school triaso ko school pon na wafiase ekasa wo ho ene ye nkomo ni gina ba ko gina sa asem no so efi osorehwe bio constitutional reforms omenye mrapon aye constitution no yerehwe sɛ nsakra bebam ni edikan owura Akufo-Addo ma committee bi say won koye sa reforms ni bi no won famra owura chairman sabons na no da no won aye won adwumawie what one report aba enti yerehwe ni edi sa nkomo na no pe yanza na yebedi sa nkomo no mpanimfu a won aye ayenga won a wobabo ne owura lawyer ansensare oye lawyer ni panin otanso na kan no da Ghana School of Law no so panin ni odi so ye Dr Kwesi Amache o kira de wo Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology na ni oto so nso ye lawyer ya osompa sorry onua nso ye lawyer owo na adwuma na fe owura kwache ofosu ono odi so na fe Dr Abdul Ateku ono nso ye political scientist ndizampani fu ni wodi nkomo owura so mpa wo afiri no so ntima kɔ no ho lawyer machie
ya minya penyi official pass afewe mbonko moye
lawyer ye be koyen asem so tawtaw owura John Mahama o sorry ye constitutional review na wahwe omanyi mrapon insecurity say etumi bam na onyame nchaade ye nwura akufu ado bro ba be si form no otew begwaku bi a owura chi mensa bonsu ene lawyer ni a wo friend kasati woda no won akwaye won adwuma no wode won report abatu abontem na no ye be se ye konkomo no ifi sa report no mame wo se ne nhu no initial impression about the report.
Okay, mina penye me da se I think my senior colleague Kasati in the report. I think so your presentation on the media sometime late last year. The American say in my humble view, Mrs. say Omaya Jumasono. Because constitution no ohwese city na teacher bi na kan na so say mrabia ni ho eye pa se ebesi nipa bone ho kwan so ode mra ne be ade bone na mrabia ni ho eye bone pa se ebesi nipa papa ho kwan so ode be ade papa. So in usually in drafting of law no the difficulty is to reach the last mile. And as I see nipa boni o mu pa no se on fanya boni na nipa papa o mu pa no so the be papa. So emrash no generally ending because there's so much nuance to it. But I think from the 2012 committee to review the constitution, the current one to review that work as well. Ultimately, Omunyinano consulted quite broadly, and in my humble view, we have some consensus at least to start an active conversation. And I say progressively have an active conversation about constitutional review. I think that some of them, the questions are there are consensus on some of the specific issues, but some of them there are no even consensus. I think that we know the parties in terms of the parts of the argument and where people lay. So I think progressively over the last maybe 12, 13, 14 years, our constitutional review, we've been talking about it. No, I think progressively, we've made a lot of progress. There are broad consensus in terms of then in terms of then and the papa no, at least we've come to a point yet in common say a common yet I say in order to make progress. So that's my initial comment to say I think from the 2012 committee to the review committee set by Yera, former majority leader, all of them have done great work putting the current context and Sabre now review no, they've actively considered the context, and I think that there is initial consensus that constitution yes it's a baby a bebo amanyosem ni amamu ewo Ghana.
So Dr. Jalilu no so me hu nefe memra ho bio Dr. Jalilu who so ya good morning.
Good morning, Doc.
Dr. Jalilu.
Adiachi.
What's your good morning?
Good morning, Pachameto Nkapa.
Dr. Jalilu.
No, Doc, me too unka.
Afishapa nso.
I think
What is your initial your friend them view about this constitutional reforms? Who them? Me initial comments. Nefe yang atu aso.
Doc, me da say before I feed this the minche what tea for the ashefo nyina. Nia meka say shall we share the constitution na ya operate and na ya constitution na allows to this bepem and over 30 years. So I say yeah history mo na nya bibisa da. And so we are still growing. Na say unyia enema bi o hwa e be to sini a certain time in your life. So you only work to improve that. Until as a minor a constitution in a guide here. Say ebia ye brand na ye pese board mpunto na ehia kwa ye be faso no constitution no my direction ni but I haven't operated it for a number of over 30 years. I'm saying I'm a but my initial comment na make can say the reforms so now ye can asem no it's like yakwe say partisanship ebe wura say and also it becomes very difficult. Both FSRs or minor political parties, civil society, all stakeholders, to say them maybe why I was say yes sir. But how are we going to do that? Let me say enona adibia high. I overshare under Professor Mills. Obu make attempts obu put together constitutional review committee ejumani so there have been the first other attempts to say or make me review the same constitution. So in the first place, so if something has been done in the past a year reviewer, then why was it necessary to say yes sir every year? It's because let me say that consensus and I say be a bipartisan approach now say between anya is a political parties, so all of them coming together. Civil society ni na omunyina atrase no why ba ekoyese bia NDC for na omu edi ebantino the MPP people will not buy into it and that's the MPP for na omu di ideas say bia im was say your constitution yes sanwa na say the other side no so basically no and then a problem because near mechanism say review na if we are able to put, to look at it from the nationalistic, if I say viewpoint, because parties will come and go, by a constitution it will remain. So if you was I think any effort to be better from your constitution, first and foremost, I was partisanship, every so I was if I said the ruling party should be able to get the other political parties, other stakeholders in
Doctor,
so that
yes. Miss out. My miss out as me. Bra, Professor Mills time on my Professor Fiajo and in the committee. What yes, Edumano. What is our report by no? Na NDC na newo. Wong hamfa, wong anhwe ama wong anyehu adwuma. Enunti enei babe do say na Akufo Addo no mobile no o set committee yew say wo hwe report na me gedi say wo hu say wo de Fiajo committee niam ni bi account na fe wo atietie sa niam yi na eno ni information am pesa mema but yem ko yengani mu ni anhwe ade bi wo gedi say won aye report ya wie den na tese wo ye etese Nkrofo suggest say one form constituent assembly na one share report ni nyina na afei one sang public engagement one omanfo nso nkasa no bia mfa nkyere na adwene na wowie a wode asem no won ayer baako ama yenhu saa asem yi wadwene ye wo ho den wadwene wo ho den
Senior, and no na me come asem. So because Professor Mills buy now omo no na kufa do so buy no omo epa yes e wo dem bi o ho a omo edika no so but I do not think that because if you to continue all this say NDC abai certainly omo so be feel say e never be o ho a na nka ompeso wo omo previous report no mu any they want to introduce that into it. So for me that's the point let me making say we must bring all other look at the previous reports now, any the current report now, there should be a committee, committee, which will have, members drawn from different states, from different backgrounds, from different, so that they will look at it nationalistically. Now, this type of partisan MPP, NDC in some free. So to me, so for me, I think that is the way to go. Because after all, constitution assembly drafted, you know,
free nipa from baby ababetinam. We did this a one form constituent assembly nana.
Yeah, exactly. And I can say, so we share even constitution and kasana constitution. There have been series of events to engage the people. Ube kaya just the DF and committee. To round to to get the views of Ghanaians. There was also the committee of eminent person. I think Afarijan and apart from that, there was also a consultative assembly. So I think the only some of the groups like GB but you can see it's a representation, from various back from market women. So I think that if you are going to have that, we must do broader consultation. So people that are asking for a committee of that, and I think in my view, and no to me abua. And yes, I will always be NDC abaya. They will take this report. Maybe now monso near let me be over any previous MPP so ever one day is going to be the same. So I think that at this particular point in time, we should have that kind of committee in place so that who will look at issues that are in the previous, report, any the current, so I think that in my view, I think that is exactly what I was driving at. Other than that, we'll continue to be having NDC, MPP, NDC will come in. This is what we actually want to do. It shouldn't be any manifesto, any party, a friend saying manifesto of political parties. So in my view, this kind of consultation, and no bit to me, abua. Yes. So to me, partisanship, every one, and not a bit to me, abua.
So here say, public and so bebem, apart from committee or better or public and who say it is a ones we engage you on and one public discussion now. Who believe with that?
The committee can. The approach may be one. The first and foremost, the most important thing is that there should be that broader consultation. So committee, and I will visit whether it be a National House of Chiefs, so it be a different kinds of aid to take their views, not put it together, or if they are going to draw people. So in my view, I think that people should be drawn from different, different backgrounds, rather than just maybe the government establishing maybe a committee of this to look into it and then to do that. So I think that if the committee can be broadened, right, so that other people with different expertise from different areas will come on board. They will look at various aspects of it. I think, and no moment a bit to me, Abuai.
Unia lawyer Sompao. Lawyer, what am I lawyer. Lawyer, Mammy Misawe. Washa, Dr. Jalilu, Achira Nadwine, Ghana Fudi Achira Wangabine say, partisanship, Kakrawum, so Boom say, Ninti, so Opasi Yifima, Anka, Winya Consultative Assembly B, na one share, our bed draw nipa fee, me I be na wonga betinam, na I share na wonga ye. Ama afraid ube huno na review na washeshen aye ni Ghana fope why do you then was asking?
Okay, the medical mechanism, I think the committees name from the 2012 committee and the current committee, I think that both of them, I think that involve both parties to try and get consensus. Into my initial comment on whether or not the initial report, a partisan, my understanding would be say partisan. Because I've looked at both reports, and if you indulge me, maybe I'll start from the more current one. The policy recommendations now, the key policy recommendations by this current reporter. Now here the previous report now, it doesn't appear as if there are much difference. Of course, the areas of priority appear to be different. But Minsu said the work in itself a partisan. I think that for purposes of next steps, however, I was a national dialogues on it, which usually would be setting up a constituent assembly or some sort of committee or some sort of national architecture where broad a bit more stakeholder review beyond the committees, to make it a more national dialogue in order to get the initial recommendations sift down or otherwise. But Emra say the specifics of the recommendation, but I have for both the first one and the second one, if you look at the white paper the president put on the first one, now heard the current recommended priorities of the second one. I just wanted to take some of them now, if the time is right, so that at least we can put it in perspective. Say, Nkomono is not exactly partisan, because I think the recommendations made and both committees are making point is that they met with both parties. So I think that there are some initial consensus between the parties, except that the consensus has to be more national in its orientation beyond just the small stakeholder engagement. Meaning, if I can run through some of the policy priorities, if that's fine by you,
Say, yeah, one by one to say yes, Parliament. The views there, what is your position on each one? But starting, I starting.
Okay, Martin. Into a list of priority, the kind which the last committee a cap on ministers, and then cap on members of parliament. So they actually are suggesting a cap on ministers and a cap of constituencies. The second one, appointment of ministers from parliament. The third one, president should pay tax. The fourth one, electing of MMDCs. The fifth one, emolument and conditions of service, which is Article 71 holders. The sixth one, appointment of heads of SOEs, which is state-owned enterprises, and the president's power of appointment. Seventh one, declaration of assets. Eighth one, National Development Planning Commission. Ninth one, functions and commissions of the human rights and administrative justice. And according to them, the priority, the last one, fundamental human rights. Inti I can labor in the details, but these 10 priorities. Now the two president white paper yes, some of the priority from the 2012. From the 2012, the main issue actually started with the National Development Planning Commission. the nature and the character of it, the scope of the national development plan, process for national. So the first one started, the white paper started a lot heavy on national developmental plan, and the role of the role of the national development planning. So that was the first priority area from the government white paper, which we saw. The second one was so the white paper goes on a lot on NDPC. So we don't, although there are some recommendations about what becomes of the NDPC here, it appears that the 2012 started very heavy on the NDPC. And then it went on to, yes, the presidency, which is the term of the presidency. It went on to some conversations around conditions of service of president, taxation of the president, the powers of appointment of the president, which also features here in some form. And then they tackled the vice president, tenure of the vice president, ministers of state. So, and then the Council of State, powers of the Council of State and the arrangement of the Council of State. So, the point, the initial point I'm making is that if you look at both reporter, there are similarities, but you also understand that both report in terms of its priorities, no, appear the weight of priorities may differ. Currently, no, I think the new work the new president will probably do is to align priorities and say, between the first report and the white paper issued on it, and this second report, which gives us a sense of priority, at least 10 priority areas, no. Do Sam Komona, does the current president find those 10 priority areas still relevant? And I said, because of change in context, no, there are new priority areas they want to focus on. It was a campaign promise. For example, Article 71 emolument was quite big. There were questions of code of conduct for public service. That was big on the campaign front as well. So I think there is reordering priorities for the new government, and then have a more national dialogue in terms of nationally, no, way out of the 10, no, these ones are entrenched into way back or referendum. These ones are not entrenched into way no the parliament can effect a bill for purposes of those changes. And then once we get a more national focus on agreeing on what the changes should be, I think we can make progress with it. But to answer your question specifically, I don't think that the report are steep in partisanship. I actually think that the report does a lot of work to try and get consensus on both sides. So the initial reports now, it quite broad, and it represents initial consensus made from the committees by engaging with different stakeholders, including the political parties themselves. I mean, say if come or not, come on, sir.
One by one, appointment of ministers from parliament. Wakasa wo ho. Nia waka na wongachro wo ho no. Current report no. Wadwene ye oden wo ho.
So, there's a history to this. The history to this, Yera Limam, Abai could not get Parliament to approve his budget. In order to cure, say, the executive may be overly opposed by legislature, no. Let's make sure, say, executive at least has 50% from legislature so that running of the state is easier. So that's the history to the current provision. But many committee in the year say, okay, so say legislature and budget and tomorrow. We saw e-levy being heavily contested by Parliament. because Parliament held the view that Sa bill no was not in the interest of the public. I think that the elected officials at any point in time should have the right to say we my for because Parliament is the only place where representation works, where we are actively represented by elected officials. So if the main justification for appointment of executives is so that there's a smooth running and to prevent the gridlock there, then I agree, sir. Legislature is a full-time work. Say be mra and mra over mram no tum say we mra we the dialogues you need, the research you need in itself is a full-time job. And the executive running so is a full-time job. So, and even for the principle of separation of powers, if we could separate those two arms cleanly in the way it says, oh yeah, mrashenia shemra, that's executives are being the executive so that the checks and balances may be pure. No? I think that I personally tend to agree with the recommendations. The state may be better off if the two rules are separated. Say, you can obey me because the current architecture among for parliament so that they can get ministerial appointment. So parliament in itself tend to suffer. But say now if they are separated, obi ko MP or ninsem ranti no koshe and yet for purposes of by necessarily. So we probably will get a bit more people putting themselves up who only understand the role of the MP, say a Beshemra, night will become a checks on the two other arms. But to say no mpembe brain nipako bimoko call for MP so that they can get a ministerial appointment. And in that case, being a member of parliament rather suffers. So I think that on that recommendation, I tend to agree with the committee on its recommendation.
What about this situation? Nkrofonzo Fero say 1979 near presidential system. Sorry, 1969 na your parliamentary system. 1979 near presidential system. Na no presidential system ni operate say two ni operate parliamentary and presidential. Aye who say amwayen enunti yanga ye current constitution aye hybrid. Enunti say woke say members of parliament no so what say what your ministers are or appoint ministers so resign. Then what about the presidential system no so? In this presidential system now why are we still in a hybrid mode?
When you was the right question, and I think that I started by trying to put the history of that provision, in context. Can we argue that the current system now boy? I think that from you can say governments have run smoothly, but I also think that in some parts. Parliament has been weakened in the process. We heard the three arms of government. It would appear as maybe until recently, a split down the aisle with one independent. No, Parliament was almost always a rubber stamp for the executive. But that's my humble view. So the reason why Parliament had been weakened consistently, is also because parliamentarians, because they were a functional part of the executive, say a co-cabinet now hobby then parliament has no say per se. Their parliament or say what the executive wants to do. But Susu said that is the original thinking. The original thinking, if you go way back to the Greeks, what this modern democracy tries to do is to blend the different kinds of governance that works into pure democracy is where there are elected officials. And MP4 still are the vestiges of a pure representative democratic electoral system. The executive, no, although they are voted for, they still wield powers of the executive, almost like a monarchy. So they are still the vestiges of the monarchy system. And the judiciary is the aristocrats, where men of technical competence are giving the purview of final decision. Indeed, what we've done is that we tried to bridge between monarchy and democracy and the aristocrats, into forming this current structure. But if you weaken the people representative voice because you've created a hybrid where the representative become a functional part of the monarchy system, which is the executive system, then you compromise the legislature by having a voice that really represents their people. Although some know against that the history may have come from a place there were some gridlocks that the executive didn't think that was important for smooth running of the state. I think that the effect of that has been weakening of the legislature over the years. If we seek to correct that, particularly going forward, and when Parliament is in some nearby, and many of them make our say, for me, I'm a great advocate for gridlocks. Mrs. said, I drain Esaya and pain bebre no Abia Adreno Yan Shedan Tanasin. If we're all thinking really hard and deep, we must disagree at some point. And it's only at the point of disagreement we can brainstorm. Brony word brainstorm ni Adremi and Ushia to say they said the astro chamber. And then in the storm, we can find the small, still voice for purposes of our way forward. Media gridlock ne sebi me nteme wase na me ne onya adwende enya bone. I think that is necessary for an effective running of a state. It may not be the most efficient, but I think it will be the most effective.
Dr. Jalilu, Sawutemenka, my question I'm a woman say, near Dr. Lawyer Sompareka, says, Yenya, Ministers of State, yaba Pawong, as you have no, 1 year MPs, Anka Babuya. Sasa Munu them.
Don't say. For me, I think this is a view I have held for a very long time. Say, having practiced this fourth Republican Constitution, I think you do prepare to be was a delinque, Parliament from the executive, because in so many ways, we share a year, one study Parliament, Parliament is weakened in a way by the fact that members of Parliament can also become ministers of state. So it do say, sometimes because some of them want, the president to see, say, the woman on the support, especially the ruling parties members of Parliament. So they will always want to do things to please the president and then his party, instead of maybe being being critical on government policies. So I think in a way, for me, it is about time say Parliament should be an independent body. A constitution envisage see a hold the Parliament to the executive, and I say it me push Parliament I think we need to remove all those things. And the key thing to me, everyone is if you want to contest as a member of Parliament, I'll contest as a member of Parliament. If you want to be a minister of state, we a minister of state, you need to resign your position as a member of Parliament and then accept that position. Maybe by law, if I say by a election. So in my view, for me, I support this. It's a view I've been holding for a very long time. So I think that because when we normally talk about this hybrid, because we share a constitution, What? Because one, your hybrid system, a number of elements were if I say bit marker say strictly hybrid systems, you know, your presidential system. I will share your system no. What actually makes our system hybrid? It has to do with, I mean, just some few provisions of constitution a whole parliament to a, and one of them mainly say if it's a key and say we member of parliament, the president be to me appoint to. So in my view, I think it's about time say parliamentarians should be, I mean, should represent first of all constituencies to come to parliament as independent people ready to, I mean, to be very critical on government if it's a business. And no more to me abua or minor. Because most of the because the system I practice whether under the NDC or under the MPP, members of parliament will always want to ensure that the first every party and a president, they will force and then get even a bit this particular deal will not be beneficial to the Republic of Ghana. But because I mean, it is coming from the president, is coming from the party. They don't want the party to look bad in a yintino. Ebe force and now say be obi or person or my president, who say, oh, me you be a me a. So I think in my view, I was saying the only first time I can say a parliamentarians stood up against president and now say government decision be the recent the 8th parliament of the 4th republic where the members of parliament from the MPP side it's original. I said no, it never be a finance minister APNC, so that person must be changed. So I think that I will say we should let parliament to stand on its own. If you want to be a member of parliament, go and contest the election, win and become a member of parliament. If you want to be a minister of state, resign from your position and then you move there. So I think that for me, I support it. I do not, I mean, have to belabor at this point.
What can I say? I think sir, your presidential. If the workers anymore, parliamentary features in the any sadi muntusha a presidential in nature. Near presidential there. Aden ye hybrid in the current system I say ye implementing ye presidential pure. I didn't need to make us nice
that's what
ministers will point them outside parliament. Once you go on that route and when you say you do presidential and the other na ungezi say yen system no crampo a presidential near strict presidential system. So I don't know what you.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's why some refer to our system as neo-presidential rather than even the classic hybrid. So for me, that's why the entire it doesn't mean say a system now you have no ABA. I am in so many at least. And I mean some kind say at least they say government be a bar or hope say. The party, I mean, because of the dominance of the party in omit to be supporting the Abua. So in a way, it means Abua government in some way getting certain things done. But the other disadvantage in saying never be Ohonswa, to me or still not you're pushy through. So that's why I said that it's just a matter of taking those clauses away so that will become strictly presidential.
Nefemi Fuamako, lawyer some power. What's your recommendation back on? Also a cap on appointment of ministers and deputy ministers. Now, Ochra, a report on nature says, Ashiafo IE ministers and any deputy ministers, Yenya Wong 55. Edunumenum, Sadi, Ujetum.
Yes, I think in my view, if the number of ministers now you have Omayino, I think Omudoso. And even the last government, the first, in term of President Akufo-Addo, I think we went up to about 120 or so, or more than about 120. I mean, just too much. So, and at the time, more reasons why say that number of ministers, but because of the goodwill at the time in election, I mean, people were waiting to see whether we're going to get that. But at the end, what did we get? What did we benefit from it? What did we benefit from it? Right? So in my view, this country can be run with far less, if I'm saying, ministers. So I'm capping, if they are saying that about 50, 55, I mean, what are the reasons for the 55? Because so far, in the Fourth Republic, ministers and deputy ministers are less than 60, right? So for most of it's been more than that. So why the 55? I still believe this country can be run by the 55 ministers, because in the first place, we share President Mahama. He's going to appoint not more than 60 ministers. So this is a good opportunity for us to assess the work that 60 ministers, or a government with 60 ministers can do. Government with about maybe 120 or 80 or 90. So the 55, I do not have any problems, with it at all. I still believe that we should have, some have even said that, and let me read it, Professor Avia. So he said he was proposing, about 30, right? So basically, we can still run with even far less than the 55. If it is going to be pegged at 55 or 60, I have no problem. I think that the number of ministers we have had in the past way too much. So say a bit to me reduce about a year. Say a bit to me abwa 55 would have made a lot, because I never 120 ministers. Let's say the back 55. I think some have even. Some of the parties even said they were given the opportunity, they will rule the country with about 40 ministers. So this cap of 55, I think these are some of the things that a consultative assembly they have to go into it to know why the 55. Can we even come down, or can we peg it at 60, and why we are doing this? So in my view, the principle is that the number now in the past a way those do and I was reducing about 55. I think would have done a lot, but can we even still come down? I think that we can still come down and still run an effective government.
What can I say? Me will propose that we can run this country by 19 ministers. 19. Na 19 no ma menkyerɛkyerɛ mu na me hu adwene wɔ. I believe we say what's your constitution ma o say cabinet is made up of between 10 and 19 ministers. Me no we nim say cabinet no is a body of senior most ministers one president na wo si gina wo take a decision. Enunti important decision bia no enye deputy minister, enye ordinary minister, a cabinet ministers. Enunti ade na yemfa 19. Na 19 no ye say because constitution nso say ye regional ministers ye were 16 in the 19 no we 16 wom as say wunya sa 16 na onipa ba ko ye minister of state or sanse ye regional minister and into ubenya for instance say wo hwe ubehu obi oye minister for defense ubehu no ye minister for Ashanti regional minister na ohwe sai tui men kontaning na matrase na maye sa calculation na mahu say eno kura bebo na eno no hia deputy ministers ndi aba ne sa ne hu hia ne technocrats no won ne be support minister na waye sa adwuman madwene ne say wo hwe etore bia na assembly asi wo ministry bi ye ni minister ho na won ama minister bi ohwe 2 ministries so yen ahu bi da kufuo time ye hu NS Debra no ye minister no sanhwe region bi so nidnama ye hu nipa bi sa papa wusu ankoma edu ba bi no nzu kura em say 2 ministries sa nti aden na enye possible e say adwuma na wo ye wo ministries ne me no ye nim say ne dodo na ye chief director ne technocrats no won na ye nti aden nti na structures no nso wo region wo dedaw won a eboya regional minister and won a wo ministries nso wa ha nti aden na umka won mom sorry na wonye say adwuma no minister ba ko pe no dawo nga no eno no 19 no we 16 na 3 na beka no 3 na beka no now they am a big departments and big ministries no one handle nti meme ma adwuna meme ye na say we ministries na akɛse ɛwɔ mu paa na yɛ 3 by 3 or 4 but akɛse ɛwɔ mu paa yɛ education in terms of financing no Joy FM report kyerɛ sɛ 29.5 billion Ghana cedis ɛna yɛde yɛtumi the finance one project which health 15.58 and which interior ministry 8.38 nti saa 3 ɛmɛyɛ 3 on their own one the onya regional minister nkam na mum wɔyɛ ayiwɔ single ministries no nipa baako pɛ nɔte no na mum other ones no ubia ukura ministry na ukura other portfolio saa suggestion hu ne dag.
Yeah, Doc. So it means that we are still talking about the fact that we should reduce the damage down in principle. But the American say the deputy ministerial positions, 100%. I agree with you. Say we need to scrap that. Ebia say yebeja ebikura ebia maybe just one under finance and economic planning, right? Attorney General. Why should we have a deputy? If I say Attorney General. We must have one Attorney General because there is the department of lawyers. So I think for me, deputy ministerial position, you bet me ask crap. One other thing I was say you consider and say pressure. I bet me a particular minister and how that person will be effective is another thing. So in my view, yes, the 19 we should retain the 19 up to the 19 now. Constitution, like I said, cabinet, not less than, not more than 19. That is good. But I think because we are still developing, So in my view, we'll still need the regional ministers. So if we have 16 regional, 16 regions, even that is also another one of the other as to whether we should have up to 16 regions. Right, it's also another matter. This is how Omoka say members of parliament. Parliament will say couple. We can let's even assume say we have agreed. Say 16 region is okay, and I still believe say regional ministers should still be appointed. So we have regional ministers, and then you have 19 ministers, right, dealing with various ideas. We can, if I say to me, the ministries to be every we can still do that, but in my view, because of in terms of your development at this particular point in time, we are in. So in my view, I think that we can still retain the regional ministers, and then the 19. We can still work with that rather than the medical guy say the 55. It was saying reasons being the 55. Until I was saying you have 55 and not 60 or not less. So in my view, to say the Prophet Vieka say we can still run the country with about 30 ministers. So I think that if we are able to have the 19 responsible for certain key regional ministers, I'm saying this because of your level of development. Any so because we offer be a finance ministry now we command an additional region say be one of the finance ministry a jumana at that every sometime a bit to me so a distorted a hamper a kind of. So at this level of development, I think that we still need regional ministers, but not the deputy ministers across the BR. We can scrap, just do away with them. ABA and medical kind of the finance ministry say, to me, I have ABA a year. I think that in my view, we can do that. But the 19, we can have education, we can have certain key, harmonize some of the ministries, and no bit move to me, Abuaye.
Say, yenye 19 no, yeah the 19 year Juma 19 ministers. Now when you regional ministers 16, now they account. Now you 35. Yo. Mamenko Dr. Lawyer Sompao, no so minko bisa na memra. Yo. Lawyer, mbacho wo ho.
Mina benye me ha. Actually, we 19 now starting fee and ho ana nanka better me starting fee maybe in constitution which is article 76 on cabinet. Not less than 10 and not more than 19. And I think that the question is time I hear constitution 1992 no. Then I doing I cast 19 for cabinet. There must have been a reason. I think that many people agree say you can run a very Ghana said you to say crown on 35 million. If you want to run effectively, what you need is now the architecture of public and civil service will now be heavy on technocrats. Indeed, the executive head of those ministries will now have to depend a lot more on really, really technical people. The people who work in public service are like the best of the best, you know. So in that sense, the minister will have to rely on very, very good technocrats who then work in the system. 35, which is the 16 plus the 19, if even you take the upper bound.
You believe in the 55, 19, or 35? Which 16. Of them?
Mimi Susu said about 35 because of the regional ministers, no. So all the regional ministers come at 35 appears to me like ideal because the regions would need somebody who is an executive, unless you want to have a system where the MDC like a mayor system where then the governors or the people who control the cities are rather the municipal assembly person or the district assembly person as the executive of that municipal, in which case you probably may not need regional ministers. So if you can have some sort of a mayor system or a system where the executives are at the district and municipal levels really run those assemblies or municipals, then maybe you can do away with executive appointments of regional ministers. But I think the consensus is this. The consensus is that we cannot go back to a time where a president at will chooses 120 something ministers. I think the consensus is that we need to, the burden of running a state should not be big enough such that it's inefficient. As to whether or not the 55 no Matier committee no put 55 no together, they appear to say both parties they propose actually the 35. So Omo proposed 35, saying inside the 19 cabinet ministers plus the regional ministers as 35. And my understanding from the committee was to say that parties ni mienu nyina say 35 they enye adwuma. The 55 was the consensus they reached with both parties because both parties in their manifestos had already said they will use somewhere around 50, 55, 60 ministers. So the consensus was because Obia had expressed an intention to run with less than 60 people. No, let's create an upper bound of 60 and say not only would it be subject to a president's whim, but then can we enforce it by law? Say, obey your man your upper bound is 60, Fasa 16 years. I also think in line with that, they're also seeking to cap constituencies to 277, which means the back on the current 276 no. Just for the mere reason of getting an odd number, but so that creative constituencies being can be. So they make many committee and Minia Penny Jalilu who spoke earlier. Then say ideally you should be able to run with cabinet in Kwa, which is 19 ministers. But because of the original structure, if you are not amending to give powers to the DCs and the MCs, or to have mayors who are in charge of those spaces, then you need regional executive ministers. But if you can redefine and restructure the powers of district assemblies and municipal assemblies to be in charge, then you probably don't even need regional ministers, in which case you should be able to run with 19. But if even you grant regional ministers should be available, that brings you to about 35. So I think we should be looking at somewhere around 35. And then we'll place a bit more emphasis on technical competence and technocrats who have skill and proven record to work with these ministers. And that's the only time we can build strong institutions. So in that case, it's not the one person appointed by government, but it's the technical people who run those state architecture, those ministries, who then matter a bit more than the political appointees, because on the other back, but now we are more focused on hiring the best of brains to run the transport ministry, to run the finance ministry, to run all other ministries. In that sense, the institutions themselves will get stronger rather than the political appointees. So those are my initial views around the appointment of ministers, the capping on the ministers.
Okay, near 55 and 35 and whatever. No, do we still need your friend deputy ministers?
Some ministries will, I think so. Some ministries, the nature of the work, so senior education, for example, some of the ministers focus on tertiary, some focus on maybe lower level. If you take finance, some focus on different things. If you take even Attorney General there are the deputies, some focus on criminal, some focus on civil. So some of the structures, but who says you cannot? The ministries themselves cannot have principal directors for those ones. Mm-hmm. So you can actually have principal directors for, let's say, those other persons. And if you truly appoint technical people of great competence for those roles, then as the executive head, yours is to provide leadership specifically, and then allow the men of technical skills and competence to work. So whether or not we need deputy ministers, I would say some of the ministries' functions would mean Nipa Bako may not be enough, but it doesn't mean they must necessarily be executive members. It can be said the directorship, the powers of the directorship may have to be looked at in defining those roles. And I just director rules, to give them the mandate to act within the scopes. In that sense, the minister
lawyer,
and the director.
Niamete wasene se wo hwe saa ho no mo na dia ene na ho no your friend then to say chief director e bia wo chief directors be no oyihwe ha no oyihwe ha saa na me se wo kanen and it's a good idea because one no wuntua won ka we already civil servant.
Absolutely. So ministers now omajuma sono say oye ne say won fa deputy there, then directors no I was say you redefine their role so that they are able to help the minister.
Yenhwe me yiwa fi wo no yenhwe 277 MPs woka so woka ho asem sa ade no me ametuwe no a different view anga me view kura na say you can have less but what you one argument no way now we say now no parties in because of one strongholds no obi e wo be say we be reduce numbers and all that na ujetum say sa argument no man no e valid na
I think we need
277 or less.
I me know again because I think the chaos now why never my attended there so I mean I think the chaos that Yentisono, which is the more ideal one at the Babano is because senior can there are strongholds. So because Ashanti region because the NDC na was inti yeah remodel 90 Ashanti region free 40 something Embra 16 yen nyina nim say embaso and I say cause yenti voter there so enye no embaso inti I think that the more peaceful
Asante region 47 will reduce so about say 30. It's still the population of Kotoa ban wonga neto. What has changed?
What has changed is then that what technically that is what gerrymandering is about. Indeed, that's a different conversation, but I think I'm here for this conversation. Indeed, said NIPA 5 and the Waha. Like I say, in a constituency back home, but meaning NIPA 5 in a media and number constituencies need to. That means me or 2 seats instead of 1 seat. So okabom ne kasa yenya ne baako that means instead of the number of seats amenya or parliament automatically it means that I may be condemned to having being a minority for life. So I think that no party will be willing to give up a constituency they think that they have a better likelihood of winning. Say okase o afi na obeye ho adwuma to redefine to say yenka bi mom yenti bi so the reason why we have the current numbers 276 now is because over the time different parties have found a way to create constituencies in their favor. Because it's been created over time to aid them have number of seats in parliament, it will be difficult to go back. Say a year film. For purposes of peace, and Tawantawa name the difficulty at the Babasaya Tisono. Yenfa Bakunka on 9 round figure. A round figure there, not just 277. Because say in 276, what could have happened? They say in Quebec, me about no Quebec, 137, pepe. Nanka 137, there. Nanka, this one independent be nature or bed, because then it's an even number. So I think that the idea of an odd number, they say there back home will be majority and 1 will be minority. So that is the thinking around adding 1. But I think that
we hear odd number now. I disagree. In 1969, members of parliament were 140, even number. What about how did it work? Fourth Republic.
Is the likelihood of majority
200 members. Odd number. We move on to 230. Sorry, even number. We move on to 230. Sir, odd number no can. I don't see the argument.
I think it's an important argument. It's the same argument we make for board, for example. Say a toaba ne paya. Decision making will become a little more difficult. So I just want to say, yeah, call that's 276 and whatever the even number. Just that the likelihoods did not happen in the times now, okay, you know. But 2020 happened. That's that means that decision be able because of the nature of the politics, no. We because say there is no way we can make a decision. So I think that the more, because you heard the 2020 parliament in particular, in many sense, decisions were made by one person, which is the one person who is the independent caucusing with the MPP. So as I said, the decider of a whole 4-year parliament, which is the 8th parliament, was actually decided by one person. Then we should understand that likelihood no bet me SCBM. And so if it's an odd number, which means that the parliament may never be able to make a decision. So that is what the odd number is seeking to prevent. Say enkoya dia afanonimi enu nyina be abupe obia anya pe. Obia timinya pe so sa dia na say it may become ungovernable in terms of decision making.
You move away na yemra asset declaration. Wo share niam bi wo na wo view wo ho yeden. Asset declaration.
So let me find a specific asset declaration, no appointment of ministers, more DCs, but I'm just trying to find the specific what they specifically said about asset declaration, fundamental human fund. Okay. So
now who say asset declaration na yen how back when you want to say you write and put it in an envelope and then go and then deposit it
with the auditor general.
Obi anim the content of it. Indeed, would be kotoa or the aqua we don't know. But now no, we say the auditor general no will look at what you are sending there and then make sure say you are really declared. No categories of people, the president, the vice, will be declared. No, yeah. In your view, also say our recommendation a good one.
I think so. One of the idea back one, just to say idea bro or my more corruption, and at least even we don't have direct evidence. I just said them, but I think there is a lot of societal reinforcement on papa we oko abai munani fie abakope fie nai wabesi we inti yenyina ejitum se ekamea eso bikwa abai ma onyan hunt, at least that's what the society believes. Sasa believe ni no credit, then it's important to answer now bikwa abai me wose yehuni awo. And if you are buying muso a yin dia wo just to measure say wakati na unya wa buy muno does it explain for the wealth you've made? It goes without saying, Mateo Penyibi, who says that the reason why it's supposed to be private when you declare an asset secret, I say Sebi say me ko abai mu na me ka say ebia me ofie mienu na me bank account me 1 million na senior exercise senior nabusuafo ebon no sombo ne osori anopa senior amanfo besi atete no ya hwe ya ne anya obi amana ambeye amba abai mu because the requirement I was ordinary directory in our to abonten is quite onerous. I understand our societal structure. Say, if I have to put my wealth, because in paper, nipa bebre, peso mu beda mu sebi mu dwetri and I say musikedi. Some for tax purposes, but some for purely personal reasons. But I think that if you're coming into public service there, then in the interest of wanting to know sebi yadi esika esha wonsa. I think that the factors that weigh on public interest and your own on your another one kasa would right to privacy gets a bit compromised. And I think that is a very difficult choice, particularly because of our society where nipa ba kubia sebi the dependency ratio is about 1:4. Nipa ba kubia the average person here nipa ba 4. If obi edene obi asebi nyame ato ne nsam kakra edene de ato abonten because they want to be in public service, I can understand the societal pressure would be a bit more, and we need to acknowledge that fact. Until once we acknowledge the societal structure, it can appear difficult to want a public publication of the assets. But I think that, so I may not exactly agree on the publication, but I agree that it must be verified and at least disclosed to the Auditor General. And so it shouldn't be a secret, it shouldn't be a secret filing. It must be filed, but it must not be available for public record, unless there is some reason why the public may have interest to know. So the American say any can say silly, but any can say money public. So particularly because of the nature of our society. But near money I was not there, was a verify. So there must be attempts to verify the things on it. But beyond the verification of the things, I don't think it needs to be public because of the structure of our society. Otherwise, public service because of the societal pressure that may come on the declaration, of your assets, it can be problematic. But I think that it must not be a secret filing or a sealed filing. It must not be, but a Nico say a public shit, it must not be publicly available to the public in general as well.
Sir, what in nanedi, woman in your public, and will be a inti himfo, na will be husadi. No, don't you take away the public, position in that matter? Say, nipa to be, nipa to anywhere, no, public no way.
Okay, so for example, Meko Hospital CCIR, my health record is available to the hospital, but I need public record. Inti me health record obia wo hospital obia doctor laboratory obia nim what my health records are, but I am from Metabontin say ya ne health record ni. I think that is what I'm saying. So the people in the Auditor General's office, the people in the executive, it will be available as a record for the persons who need it. It is available, but any newspaper, I can say, the account you, particularly because of the nature of our society. And if call our social structure because the public publication may be good, but I think for the nature of our society, and particularly for dependency,
na meba ho Dr. Jalilu mimisa view about this 277 MPs ho mepe view na fe yenhwe asset declaration. What are your views there? Ansana me de wako be before.
You've seen me that say, let me say the constituencies, I think it's 270.
One report, they stated 277. So currently, you were 276. Now one argument and say obi ani wo bepene ama wate won deso because ebema ne representation in parliament and eswa enunti they added one just in case say there's a need to add one, fine, but obi baby or one gina ho but one what the account. That is the report 277.
Oh, okay, maybe we can say 270. All right. Near Mekan said, in my view, me, sir, Namano, a dose to do. So, and I didn't think I could do. I think we started with 200 constituencies, right? From 1992, and now 200 constituencies. Because constitution in Kasa, like I said, we should not have less than 140. So it means we can have more than 140. But we started with 200 in 1992. Until time President Kofoba, move equal 230, almost increase equal 275. I think constituencies, in my view, a dose to do. So, but the point right now, the question is, who can say something some kind who can say, or the kind of be about gerrymandering and say he doesn't want to move there. Basically, we can't run away from that fact. So that is the whole thing, because for some time, political parties and our government almost share about the number of election or contest in a certain seat or okay, and they create more constituencies. In doing that, now even though you say electoral commission, right, and they do one country, I can say the delimitation of constituencies are, but you can never take the rule of government from it, because electoral commission they create taking responsibility in paying for additional and normally parties will certainly want to win more seats. So in my view, we share it's not about say maybe a development. I think that I was say reduce the numbers, So in order not to create any you want to reduce constituency in my if I said 75 now you create, say I think we need to scrap them and revert to 200 because one, creating constituencies, when you take consideration of the population and also if you hold the land, if I say size and also account. So why was it they need to move from 200 to 230 and then from 230 you could do 275? Omaya debia your resources how to manage ourselves a very difficult and yet the same politicians now are complaining about then when it comes to certain things they do things now or minor. In my view 275 a dose to do but say na almost say in my view the 277 now I think we should rather bring the number back to the 200. Maybe and I share I say demarcation should just be the 200 constituencies now at the time of the 1990 from 1993 your first MP now yes and no more bit to me reduce it your cost drastically when you have 75 constituencies now if you are a boy a day titiru pa na 275 members of parliament ni etumi ya ebroso emma nanka 204 na omo no edempa na ede abreye. So in my view I think that we should rather go back to the 200 because yes
our friend then 77 and all that what suggestion say eno na me follow say in reduce other in reduce in proportional terms say you reduce obiya de by be a 30%, 10%. A bit to me the NBC a certain number be obianzo will not be at disadvantage.
So the question is the 200 19 from 1992 from 1992 that you 200 and no professional challenges been at the time. So we continue with it until
we could 200 na says na it could create a problem. Na umfa ratio be ntoso ebe reduce so adeno say obia de ne be equal say 3% and 5% need to reduce here obia no what strength will not be compromised. Nia wo na ba for obia de aba form in that order. What about that view?
So that it means ebia a friend say me fam say ebia me fam say ebia OT for example now you reduce it by 10% in other regions. I think the point that I'm making is say in 1992 now yenya 200 so what went into it, they took into consideration the population and then the land size because that's why we share some constituencies we say only just be about 33,000, 50,000, 60,000 and now over 100,000 now sometimes land account. The question I mean to say a day in a man moving from 200 now operating from 1992 up to the year in the 2000s and they started say increasing because there was a time now more increasing to about 230. Now Dr Asah-Asante said or more use a particular formula. But the point is that if we are capping, it means that it's going to affect affected some parties. So and then the issues will be raised by the various parties, assuming the Mahama administration and a person implement it some reduce it a year. Certainly there will be issues. Interamerica said in order to save you shall see with 200 we already have those 200 maybe not constituencies so why can't we come back to the 200 now right? Because and then say 10%, right, and then 15%, 5% from a year say it be affect it certainly it will still affect if I say because some people will complain and say the number of your population but we are talking about representation, one person representing the various so I think in my view and also but why I so are reducing now for problems in the and I may feel say why can't we go back to the 209 share as yen
o per se ebeba form so say if the state betumi ahwe no ato so in a certain uniform manner I think you are for it.
Yes, I will say
right. Yenhwe menhwe view issue of let's look at it this way. Payment of taxes by the president. So one report on said the president must pay tax. Na ashenkrofue inkurang it motivates people to also pay tax and all that. So I don't know why we need to them payment of tax.
Oh yeah. Yeah, me no more on that point. Me no more adwene. Me no more adwene because I mean, obia was obia etua tax or oman. So and president and was the number one person. Even Krofokra omo very minimum wages na etua ma omo no obia etua tax. The president must pay tax. And you know, previously na constitution exempted the president from paying taxes. And you know, I think in my view, the president should pay tax. I see no reason why the president should not pay tax. Every citizen must pay tax, and the president must also pay tax. No, no to me, I say amount for say every person is paying tax. So because at the end of everything, the president, apart from say the salary, there are so many other things now of mine take care. So we a president. We actually as a president into your into your na some will be or maybe a lower level person in the first public na on your tax na president into your tax and say no into so I agree with them say omuma president to into your tax.
Amenko lawyer ho MMDCs was a win elect one some common ka say e ba so na Akufo-Addo time na Ghana for ebogui bra so say saden e ba so yana
election of MMDCs on I think the bigger question was whether or not it should be on partisan or non-partisan basis. And the current committee recommends that it should not be, or it should be on a non-partisan basis. There was consensus saying to elect MMDCs. But I think that the question was yen to abano our MPP NDC in that nature, and I said it should not be on partisan lines. There's a reason why the Constitution held there should not be any partisanship at the local level, and I think I still think it's relevant now that in Komodo Omo say partisan lines. They say that's the only way parties will get interested, so it will mobilize a lot of interest in elections at that level, and that's the only way there would be a lot of diversity and growth. Because the Red District Assembly now currently sans Yamma party in kind per se nipa be bring koto. And even that the argument is that there's partisanship anyway, but because there has no competition directly, nipa be bring koto abano even for the assembly members, into Kasayento MMDC is without the partisanship. Nipa be bring shada any interested, and the strength of mobilization, Abia and Kosoro, because party for ni there or campaign akasa Muntoma ye member of parliament ye MMDC the neighbor into there will be a lot of interest in getting the right person. And common me and I think I hear the argument in saying ABI to partisan lines are a bebwa with mobilization. But I also think that would be problematic because say everyone say MPP now also na say voter raging the partisan lines are and no the MMDC is no would appear say ABI from the record of the history we know regions being nifa baby or some parties would always win the executive of those districts and district and municipals. What does that mean for effective running of those places? Inti ebia ye amanyo assembly fee ho na se ye ka se obi nyina ebia onim se me o MPP na me o NDC there, but since man nyina wo mo ticket so no, maybe we can get a bit more consensus. They will be a bit more open to work with the central government in developing those places. Until on those weights, no, I tilt towards voting on non-partisan lines. And I think say into yen koto ababra yen na yisum say yen to abani assembly executives for district and municipals, but my no MPP ni NDC. It's say because some areas no the party in opposition would almost win all the seats, and it may create unnecessary friction for working with central government. So at least once they are not identified, and now Omunya party ma potting there, not just say they are deemed neutral, even if say himself or party there, because they did not run on that party ticket. Ebema on the central government for allocation of resources the resources without a clear sabotage of MP and this may work better for the state. Enti many of the make a man again I just say I was say to aba a district assembly, not only district assembly members but the executives at the district and municipal level. I think that the point of diversion is a abaniento on partisan lines and amento on partisan lines. And the last referendum on that, the last amendment on that failed particularly because the recommendation by the MPP government was a on partisan lines. And then the NDC held the view that it should not be on partisan lines. And so that is how come that process broke down. Currently, the committee suggests on non-partisan lines, and many committee on the weight of it because of the reasons I've given. Say on non-partisan lines are ABI actually say on partisan lines.
Mimi saw na fede yan wrap yan conversation wo sa appointment you sorry about this constitutional review huniamai and wo share report now one would have thought say anka wobeka bibi about Council of State ho asem and Supreme Court currently in Crawford believe say the Council of State no is an advisory body. But this is a councillor, a wealth of experienced people, wo nipa bia we important wo. Mti aden na wo suggestions are woman just advice. They are binding on government. Na giving one expertise in one man Crawford susu say anka aden na wo mfa won ka parliament on na upper house. Sorry. Yes, the upper house. Now lower house. Now when you being hono one decision no a binding in form of advice. Sade no anka ne edwene ho say anka be pue wo constitution yimu na fe wa kan asam nso yen ahu ne eto so ya bien wo ho enso ye Supreme Court nkrofo nso believe say court no ye wo lower ceiling but upper ceiling ye ni nti why don't you put what upper ceiling cap it na enonso amuayen sanse ma bien how do you see them?
Okay. I think that the first report, no, the white paper now on my opinion issue on the first report, no, there were a couple of recommendations around the Council of State. On my opinion, GB2 and GBN2, for example, was to reduce appointment by president on the council from 11 to 5. Yenyina said that the president has a right of appointment into the council. Into the first question of what then becomes the nature of the government of the Council of State, which is what you are saying, an upper chamber with a more definitive rule. The first report made a recommendation that it should. This is the initial constitutional review report made a recommendation that it should stay as an advisory body. And I think that was endorsed by the government as an advisory body. The reason why the council is maintained, or many people still hold the view it should be held as an advisory body, is because the architecture of the two parliamentary tier system, I don't think that we have found a way to implement it before. It doesn't mean we can't try it out, but it has its weaknesses in other places. Indeed, many people still argue that council, let's leave it at advisory, as an advisory body. Sebi, yemfa nisa abrewetia asem chere so ayebeko ni nchaya kobusa no. The question is then that what becomes of its advice? So the nature of force or the force of law of its advice, without consequence, then why is it necessary in its first place? In the question we need to answer is what should be the nature of or the legal effect of its advice? Into the question of answering, say, what's the legal effect of its advice? Is a question we have to answer. Inti ye ka say chire so ay beko abrewati anchen but say ko abrewati anchen na de obeka no ye pen de ye adwuma de then we may as well not need abrewati. Inti in terms of the recommendation from the first constitutional review, the view was keep it as an advisory body, and keep it as an advisory body because running as a chamber of parliament and its implication, even for cost, the incident of it may be a bit more. There's nothing the parliament cannot effectively decide. So let's leave the parliament to have a free hand to decide whatever without subjecting them to an upper chamber. But having said that, then you bit me about or more advice. What is the legal effect of the advice? Mr. Say the question we need to answer is the legal effect of the decisions of the Council of State. The nature of the council, the nature can stay advisory, but we can adjust some decisions of it. For example, if it's about appointment, if there is a clear objection from the Council of State, that should matter. I don't think that the executive should have the chance to neglect a clear objection from the council. Indeed, those are fine-tuning the legal effect of the decisions or the advice of the council is what I think is important. I will say, but the nature as advisory may stay intact. On the other question you asked, about the judiciary, whether we need an upper bound for the Supreme Court. It would appear so, except that I have a fair understanding of the caseload. And so usually, the argument made for more judges, is made because unlike other places, because they have a definitive number, each of those states have their own Supreme Court, and then the federal Supreme Court has a specific number to answer clear questions of constitution in its limited sense. But cases break on Supreme Court, including sometimes normal cases on without regard to land or without disregard to land or divorce or anything. All the other cases, some cases have the right of appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. Because the court is not beyond its original jurisdiction on constitutional review and as interpretation of the Constitution, they have incidents on normal cases that travel from High Court sometimes all the way to the Supreme Court. And so the caseload sometimes makes it impossible to have a definite number. Say a running effective judiciary where cases in court then we need a certain structure to it. So the advice in many senses has been, okay, then set up a constitutional court and then say it's a part of the Supreme Court or the original jurisdiction, there's a clear number, in which case you're separating a Jumana Kanina, which is in many parts on appeals, on listening to other cases. Free the constitutional interpretation role, because usually that is what has a lot of consequence or a lot of effect on the executive and legislature in terms of to maybe set up a constitutional court with a definitive number and then leave the other rules of the Supreme Court. And in that sense, you can have as many lawyers as many judges as are important for the smooth running of the judiciary. But for purposes of constitutional review let's have a separate mandate, in which case, a fixed number of eight. You can only appoint onto that court if there is only one person out. That becomes definitive. But because their current rule, particularly on appeals coming from the lower court, I think it's a better thing if we want to put a cap, because it makes the work a bit more difficult. Minim say machemwa and minim say if my views are clear, but those are my humble views.
Answer na lawyer Baba Hobio no me mo boso nchire tiefo ni ahwefo se put betuma hwadi wo Facebook Angel TV News betuma hwo na fe WhatsApp nso ye number ni 0551 669 326 na yin phone number nso ni 0551 669 325 yebema kwan kakra na atiefo ne ahwefo wonso nga bisansam kakra ansa na yebeye saade no yereko na mako Dr Jalili ho na wakan bibi kakra bi na fe yin ahwe educational reforms na fe yin abue okwan na ma atiefo ne ahwefo wonso wongatumi akire won adwene nunti sana yere ne Dr Jalili so wo so ya Chirawajune wo this constitution yehwe ni review yi ne ho niam ya wuze niam bi wo ha ayire film anka nanka nipa bi hwe se wonka Supreme Court ho asem o wonka wo friend den Council of State ho asem yante na wadwene chirawo den na fi yanko bi foforo so bone to Dr Jalil Doctor, how also?
Pastor, me also.
Dr.
All right.
Gali.
Yeah. American say I was saying Supreme Court also a feature in so me share one of the key things that you care about court has to do with Article 46 also. Say ABR, Chief Justice ADR, choir president no FSO. I think me who say Omaka and I think. The numbers now I think it should affect the Supreme Court as well. We should have a ceiling, because at the moment it's open, and Obiabe to me Abba Obia, and already political parties, their views about the judges, Supreme Court, Ebia Bibiba, when they are going to appoint that, why they was appoint to the Eco Supreme Court. So, because one at Nintia Mikasenka was saying also a feature I say, why near other appointed Supreme Court judges, no, to near to me, Eshan and Sano, as a president. And I say, Ebia, I was saying independent body be, or why Ebia, I'm going to be appointed Supreme Court judges. Nintia Mika, as a minister, because of the nature of your politics, or my. Say Obi appointed, and it sounds also because one, as we say, election petition, President Rawa appointed a Chief Justice and also appointed Supreme Court judges or contesting elections to be the other so basically sometimes there's some kind of people will not have that he said because of as you may see appointed maybe almost the AP or may or was omoye. But that I say a president appointee in on one almost city on the case into sometime some kind of a mistrust be ever the confidence and mistrust in a war if a Supreme Court room. So I think that I think almost touch on the Supreme Court about who should be appointing the Supreme Court judges are say and also idea Michelle may say committee na if there should be a consultative committee and that's a constituent first committee a bit me these are some of the things I think that they should be looking at and a capping if the ceiling here so because I don't should be to me reduce I mean that ABS have more numbers sana ya nyenwo a parliament ni muntina today we are now talking about the fact say reduce it. So I think in my view no say cap and also be to me Abuaye. So I think review no more. I was saying I'm also taking into serious review of the Supreme Court. Now I'm making certain than rather just simply about the removal of maybe a petition to remove the Chief Justice. No, I think they should have gone further to look at the ceiling. At least we must have a ceiling of our Supreme Court judges, and as to whether. Because they say I think I don't know whether we have close to about 20 or so. So 18, 19 or 20 thereabout. So some people still feel say, I mean, why can't we have about 9 Supreme Court judges? Maybe they will also be talking about the fact that ABA or more several cases to sit on. But I still believe that ABA almost structure and then maybe some of those are somebody it can reduce. I mean, the Jumana or so some people have called for the fact that we must have a ceiling. You have 9 Supreme Court judges, and I say you have 13 Supreme Court judges. So in my view, I think the ceiling be about the ceiling and then who appoint the Supreme Court judges. I say and also be to me Abua. Yes. On the other, you talk about the ceiling patcho. The next issue that I think I'm losing it a bit.
You were friend then Supreme Court. Now Council of State.
Council of State.
Do you think
yes?
I think one can be because who believe we say Council of State, I say yenya what is over na what one be upper chamber. Is an say one idea woman advice and you're binding on the government. Now what is your second chamber there? You make the best out of that chamber. It's where experience, they are everything. What's your view about that?
I mean, 100%. I agree with that view. Council of State, I was here dissolving that institution. So we should dissolve it. As to whether adopted by Cameroon legislature is another matter. But in my view, Council of State should be dissolved. Niente America in say President Arane election where we need constitutional I'm a president I say or appointed ministers. So cabinet ministers 19 or bet me appointed other ministers. They say I can see reduce that number. Council of State advisory body. At the end of say advisory body biano the person now advising on the person is not bound by your advice. Make I say there was one particular case let me say Asante Bedia too. So yes, a court. I don't know whether he went in person or he presented someone. That has to do with the fact that I think President Mahama also should perform a certain Council of State Emma advice and but court no is advisory in nature. So, and that is right. The person is not bound by that advice. Why should we continue to maintain and do even president even take, listen to the Council of State now say president, they take a from them because we share how it is the composition. I do not think they make a very good from the Council of State. In my view, it should be dissolved. So Parliament should still remain as Parliament. We want to reduce the numbers. If we are going to move it into a bicameral legislature, there are disadvantages in adopting bicameral legislature as well. But for me, we are speaking about Council of State. In my view, it should be completely scrapped.
Council of State, who say it should be scrapped and all that. Na educational reforms are Urab Mahama Pesoyeno. Also best started from lower level through to secondary school to the tertiary. Is it a good decision to take?
Yeah, I think so. I think the education system needs to be reformed. From the basic level up to the tertiary level. We have had reforms in the past. There have been reports, previously, the same thing. At certain point in time, for example, SSHS, right? Edu baby, it's not a senior high, senior secondary school. Edu baby, so I was saying in senior high school, reasons have been given. Say, what has changed? Now, we share a situation and there. Look at here. Especially from even the basic through the secondary education. Look at the system now, and they say most parents do not even know when their children are going to school or when they are even coming home. To send messages say be school maybe Friday within less than 24 hours. So we must have a very coherent system. From this particular period of time to this period of time. This is a period now. We need to streamline things. Over the past, in recent, years, and all boils down to the free SHS now. Because I was previously, numbers, about 400,000 in a city, but because of it has increased. If I say numbers, which is a good thing, normally just don't have access. But the question also has to do with also the quality. Today we talk about examination fraud. Recent reports we will say yes, it has increased in the at the same time examination fraud also increase. So I think that a lot need to be done in our educational system. So President Mahama reform. He is going to look at it holistically. I think that I'm all for it. But in doing so, I think it is important to bring all stakeholders to so that we'll have a national view about it and how we want to progress. So that at the end of NDC will be in power for 8, 12 a year. New government be available at any point in time. Every person will be comfortable running the same system. We have had this in the past. O level, A level, no. Never run until so basically, we should do things in such a way because government will come and go, but the system should continue to run effectively. But in such a way, the government another government be to me about. At a certain point in time, the same SHS, it will be the number of years. You see, increasing 4 years. It will be so yes, 3 years. So I think that we must streamline things so that we'll all be comfortable knowing very well. Say, they go to school from this period to this period. everywhere. So I think that it is important that I support that call. Say the president say reforms or no, he's going to look at it in that fashion. I think that we should support that. But what I am also praying for is that we need to engage. We need to bring every person on board so that it will not be like the NDC will do it. When NDC is out of power one day, next year say another person will also come and say they be near NDC for year and to say that yes, we are marking time. So I think that I support that call. It is important that we introduce some reforms, streamline issues. We need to know exactly where we are going. We should build the system in such a way that any other person can come and then be effective in performing rather than every 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. So I think that I support that call. Yeah.
Sure. Reforms on is it basic level? Is it basic level or middle level or tertiary level?
If we are going to be very nationalistic about it, right? I think that we should look at it if basic level, right? We need to do it. At the secondary, or maybe the from the secondary level, at the higher levels, so we need to look at the system holistically. I think no moment to me, we should not just limit it to say primary education and now secondary education. But I think that for looking at the situation, currently, I say the secondary education, but I think that we should be very comprehensive in looking at the whole thing, looking at the education system as a whole. So that to me, that's what I'm saying. So that any other government that will come will run the same system, but it shouldn't be like so primary. I was saying me say no. Another government comes, they be near and yet until I was saying say. So so I think that we should engage, and then we should be very comprehensive and holistic in reforming your system. So we should look at it at all levels, from the basic level to the upper levels. Yes.
And then one content say, is there the need to change it drastically and now say aligning with near my course we are seeing some content na emma near enkwani me say mpeng bebre no work o say tertiary no ade a ye kire no kra ye grammar enunti mofra ni wie school a wonya adwuma nye ne ho niama saa niama no content no so wa dwene kire oden wo.
Well, in terms of content, baby fine, because right now, like talking about STEM are we introducing, which is a good thing, right? There are a number baby it doesn't mean say bibia na or say yes bibia ne who say if we need to bring in certain things, we need to. And then maybe also we should leave them out, right? So we can look at the content. So from secondary level to if I say to be a university education, for example, a consistent. So will be a steady A, B, and C secondary. So maybe a university and our tertiary other that does it align with near or from secondary education, and so we need to look at the content and look at everything. We need to look at things holistically. Content is also part of it. Right, but it doesn't mean that we should just change. Things anyhow. That's why it is important that experts are put in place. They should look at issues critically, because the system. If the system is not effective, effective BBR. Until I was say your system na ye. But me bomb say yes, we should do it in a way say a government will come and they will continue to run the same system, because parents are tired. Everybody is tired about the way our SHS specifically has been run over the past. Because we should know exactly when children are going to school. This type of say a binumbeko na ebinom de ewo fie and you wouldn't know. I mean, it's so confusing. So I think this is not what we should be. I mean, we should be praying for. We need to run. This is a content. There's no. I'm all for it. I was say yeah, you know. I was say yeah. Because if you at the university, you and I will at any time, piano, to me, share or answer and the next semester. No, you go back again and look at. Never been as I was say because society is dynamic. It's a at every year, so things have to be relevant to us. I was say yeah. And you know, in my view, we can look at the content, but look at everything that will make educational system consistent and effective. I'm all for it.
Lawyer Sompao, lawyer, educational reforms. I mean, Grofo Kamwasem say Yense Saniama content, structure, and Wonyama. As I say, okay, Ujina.
Okay, me starting common on education saying the median age of Ghana is 19 years. Well, some say 21, but however you look at it, for Ghana for me, be a back technically less than 21 years. At that stage, the more important need for that society the youth is like more than 50 or is more than 50%, education. Because education then enable skills, the mindset, the character formation, all of that education. Indeed, I think that the need for education, particularly because of our population dynamic. It tells us a population dynamic require for a lot of investment in education. Then education means the access. The also mean quality, which is the content conversation, and now only mean having. And the third one, outcome. The on access, your constitution started with the free compulsory basic education. So technically, everybody from the basic level now to SHS 3 or till you finish SHS, it's been made is mandated. So I was a Ghana need Babia have a free access and a compulsory access to basic education, which we've defined to include secondary education. So the very first question on education, access. Now, the interesting thing to say is that societies that transform, the measure of education that transforms a society is actually tertiary index, the population, the index of people who have gone through tertiary education into a university or tertiary, after secondary, the number of people who get access to the tertiary as a function of the population, and that is what defines societies. And the best estimates put if you get about 40% of your entire population going through a tertiary education, the society naturally takes a different course because afe no bia ko school kakra adwene mo abie kakra, so we can have serious conversations and obia build a skill set relevant to adding to productivity of the state. Into the very first one on access, at the lower tier, we've tried to ramp up access and tried to give a lot of access from primary school all the way to secondary school. Of course, there are still challenges in access to certain institutions, but at tertiary level, the access is still, there's still a lot of access challenges at the tertiary level. So that's my first point. On the second point of quality, or on the second point of content, yes, there's been a lot of curricular suggestions and curricular changes, but I think that we're very deficit in content. If you compare the qualities in Diamond, say a class 4 ni Ghana, near the Netoto class 4 ni Japan, and a class 4 ni UK, and a class 4 ni China. what would be the nature of the quality of content they would have? In TFN say Afakra 8 years, every Ghana, the average 8-year-old in Ghana, Yafa 8 years every China, Yafa 8 years every Singapore, Yafa 8 years every UK, Yafa 8 years every United States. Would the level of their education at 8 years be the same? I think that without belaboring, Mubebre or calls who would agree, say it doesn't appear, say the quality of the education they would have had would be the same. And for many of us, even our students are go through the system, even to the higher level, struggle on basic arithmetic, struggle on basic.
Program yi yɛhwɛ wɔ Facebook live NGO TV news na wobɛtumi nso ahwɛ nso wɔ afrɛ WhatsApp yɛn WhatsApp number 0551 669 saa number na wɔ hɔ for telephone line nti obi a wo bibi kan wobɛtumi de afa hɔ yo lawyer mbacho na yɛnkɔ
mbacho temenka. Okay, the American man said the second one is quality, and over quality in common. We need to do a lot in improving quality. But the third one here outcome say when we know then obey me or the Bible society inti scale bend when ya then important now obey me down side then now obey me what skills have you acquired, and I don't think that we are emphasizing on. What are the minimum competencies and skills, competencies acquired? So we class 6 what should you be able to do? JSS what should you be able to do? High school, what should you be able to do? University, the translation of the education into specific skill sets and a contribution to productivity is also a question we need to have. So I think that the last government did a lot, particularly on secondary access to education. But we can understand that the questions on quality across need a lot of work. We can also agree, say, translating the education into specific outcomes and specific skills outputs needs a lot more work. Yakasa educational reformer, it is absolutely necessary, particularly considering, say, your youthful population, no? But in focusing on that, I think when quality and translating into specific skill sets, no, whilst we work a lot on ramping the access at the tertiary level, because that's where the real change happens. So those are my initial comments on the nature of review I think our educational system needs.
Medawase aha na brebe mayen kwan amayen aye edijumedi no dawase anope pa se wababeboa yen omanga na dawase Dr Jalilu onso yedawase so wababeboa yen ama na edjumedi na efefefe mu amutie yen aseda yemode mu amuhwe yen so aseda yemode mejiri se dasene yebeba abebo mu pon mu na moje nga wa tu ni atu edjumadi ne so sese awon ato abawie sese yereba memu governance aninti munya krado na muabo am ho ntwen yen ye de nsampa ne bebrem won echinchim mfrima yen technical team asada yemode ye damase dasene ye behia
Dr. Jalil, nice meeting you.
Thank you, my brother.
Have a good night.
Yeah, another time.